This morning I drove to the Latterswald to see the positions from where the 94th Infantry Division attacked Sinz at the end of January 1945. As you can see, the field across is the field across which these troops attacked. Those farmhouses over there, they weren't there back then. This was an open field, and then in the distance over the open pastures you can see another farmhouse, and somewhere to the right of that lies Sinz. So where this car is driving, in the far distance there's the Sinz-Lemich highway. Basically what you're looking at is the Unterste Busch. When the 94th Infantry Division attacked at the end of January, troops were lying in the forests behind me, and they were attacking across this field and through the forest in front of me. Now you have to imagine they were supported by tanks later on coming from the direction of Nenny, and they were held up by several tank traps that were dug in the area. One was running across the field over there, like it went straight through the field, and it basically protected Sinz from a direct attack by tanks. So what you see behind me is the Latterswald woods, and this edge of the woods is the spot where F Company 302nd was lined up. Further to the back of the woods, near that corner, that's the spot where B Company 376th was lined up for the attack. As you know, the attack was first started with 3rd Battalion, but they suffered heavy losses. So they were pulled back, and 1st Battalion was moved up to continue the attack, to continue the drive for Sinz. And when the men attacked across the fields, they were countered by a fierce German counterattack that struck them simultaneously. So when troops were in the field, the different companies were in the field, there were always clear boundaries between the one unit and the other. So these were designated unit boundaries, and where they crossed the front lines, they were marked on the maps with a little circle with a cross through it. So that would be the point where the front line was cut by a unit boundary. You see that on overlays, you see that on maps. The thing is, these boundaries had to be clear positions in the fields. As I turn back, this would be about the boundary of F Company 302nd and B Company 376th. But if I turn around, then you can see some very distinct features that might have been a great aid to help in the unit boundary, because you see this fence here and this tree line going fairly straight into the valley, and this would explain to me how they would have known where to attack. So B Company would have been to the left of this fence, and F Company would attack to the right of it. And as I'm making my way towards the woods, walking away sort of from where the B Company front line is, the road bends here, so it goes slightly north, and I'll follow it and then work my way round into the woods again to see if I can find any of these B Company positions from the end of January 1945. And as I get into the woods, you can immediately appreciate how dark it becomes once you're in. And I'm taking a side path here. I want to show you something that is in these woods, and it has been lying here for some time now. I'm not sure what it is. Might be World War II stuff. Just don't know. I don't recognize what it is. Someone might, so if you do, please let me know. So I'm still moving north, back to the Latterswald, and I have to keep an eye out for the field to my left, because that is about midway of the company positions for B Company. So I'm out of their position sector right now, but I'm walking back toward it into the woods, and then I'm gonna scan to the left and right if I see any positions that were dug back then. We'll see what happens. And as I walk further into the woods, I see some small depressions where shallow foxholes might have been dug. Very difficult to tell, but they're pretty much aligned alongside a small road facing the rest of the wood. So I'm moving a little further to see if there are more here, because I'm getting to an open field which would have been the end of the B Company positions. I'm near the edge of the forest and I keep seeing these small indentures in the forest floor that could very well be shallow dugouts the men used prior to their attack on Sinz. Now if I turn around, you see that I'm standing at a field, and this field was the unit boundary for C Company 376th. So I'm going to step out of the forest here real quick, and then you can see another line they used to designate a unit boundary, and that's a very straight road separating the forest from the field. So again, B Company would have been there, C Company 376 would have been along the edge of the woods over there. And to the back, in the valley, you can see across the Moselle, that's Luxembourg, and beyond the ridge, more over there, would be Nenich. Of course, this is hardly visible on video, but you have all kinds of dentures here in the forest floor. Now you might say a denture is a denture, and very hard to differentiate between a place where perhaps a tree fell between a foxhole that was dug some 80 years ago. But then if I walk these woods and I see the way these dentures are somehow linked to each other, the spacing between them is fairly even, and they are positioned at logical distances from tree lines or from roads. So you see a tree line, and just into the forest you see a line of shallow holes. So that for me is a dead giveaway that we're talking foxholes here, shallow, hastily dug before the attack. Again, I'm not sure if it's clearly visible on film, but the dark spot in front of me is another indenture, and as you can see, again, this is at a very logical spot. It is where the forest has an edge. It's straight across from a field, so this would be a position where you would set up a light machine gun or get a couple of guys in a hole to overlook the field. Everywhere next to where the road is, I have these small indentures in the forest floor. Here's one behind me again. So this definitely makes sense. And everywhere in these woods you can still find metal parts from vehicles sometimes, from, of course, shrapnel is something you find a lot. Usually when people dig for stuff like that, it's worthless, or it's ammo, stuff like that. They throw it just at the base of a tree, they collect it there and they leave it there. So this is basically a World War II relic hunter's trash heap. I'm continuing my way on the edge of the woods, straight through where B Company positions were back in 1945. I see less evidence here, some shallows over there. The forest floor is overgrown here because I guess there's more light coming through, but this is B Company area, definitely. Here where the tree is, a small tree, there's a larger hole, but it also could have been a position dug by the Germans. It's much bigger, perhaps a company command post, be something like that. Now I left the B Company sector and I'm walking in the part of the forest where F Company 302nd had positions before the attack on Sinz. I'm making my way back to the car now. So this was my first stop for today, and I'm going to move across the field. As I told earlier, the troops attacked across the field, then were countered by a simultaneous attack by the Germans and had to fall back. Later that day, the Unterste Busch, it was captured by American troops, but not after B Company suffered some terrible losses, amongst which was Lieutenant Benjur. It's Sunday morning, it's very early, it's a sunny day, and there's a lot of traffic on the Sinz Remich highway. These might not be the best recordings when it comes to sound. Okay, I'm standing near the Sinz Remich or Sinz Nenich highway. It goes from Sinz all the way back to the Moselle, to where Schloss Bübingen is, to where Nenich is. And across from the Moselle is Remich. What you see up there, where the mills are, that is the Campholz Woods. And you can really see how they dominate this part of the battlefield. And to my left, these hills extend toward Munsingen, and that's why it's called the Munsingen Ridge. Basically, it divides the Saar-Moselle triangle in two halves. The one half that where all the small streams flow toward the Moselle, and the eastern half where all the small streams flow to the Saar River. And that is why you not only have a very hilly, sloping upward region, but it also goes up, you know, in hills and little valleys, and through those valleys the streams flow towards the Saar River or the Moselle River. So that gives this area a very distinct geographical pattern. And some 94th Infantry veterans I spoke to told me that they had the impression that the fight was always uphill. So they were always facing German troops that were higher up than they were themselves. And if you look to where we are now and imagine that Tattingen and Butzdorf is there behind the Latterswald, you can already see the terrain is going down in that direction towards France. So I'm standing at the edge of Unterste Busch. You can see the Latterswald. Somewhere in the Latterswald is where E Company 302nd Infantry had their positions. Then a little further to the west is where F Company 302nd had their positions. And then in the farthermost corner, this is where B Company 376th Infantry had its position. And then beyond that, as I told you earlier, was C Company. Again, we're looking at the Latterswald. In this valley, a tank trap was running from the edge of the woods. It was coming from Tattingen. It was running from the edge of the woods all the way through this field, somewhere where the tree is, up to the Sinz-Nenich road. And when US troops attacked, they had some armor support. Even a small panzer battle ensued in this area, and one of the tank traps further up ahead was bridged, but then the tank traps here weren't bridged, so the tanks couldn't cross. But later they were pulled up in the in the attack on Sinz, and were actually able to get up to the road and fire into Sinz proper, into the town, support the attack. Unfortunately, though US troops managed to capture Sinz, they were pulled out. They had to evacuate the town, and they regrouped in the Latterswald. So they basically fell back because the position at that time was still untenable, and that mainly had to do with the fact that armored support was again pulled away from the 94th Infantry Division, so the division was on itself again. General Maloney had to figure out a way of breaching only using infantry troops, so they fell back.